Hello students, welcome back to again this next lecture related to the lecture uh, Introduction to Function. So, we are starting with functions. Now, in the previous lecture we have come across the conditional statements, looping statements, and now the next one is it is the one of the important topic in Python, that is function. The biggest property for the function is it is a block of code that requires calling. That means it is only operated when you need to call it. Just like whenever you need a friend, you call his or her name, let us say hi Abhishek, that means the Abhishek is now going to respond to it. The same way the function also responds on the basis of calling. That means the block of code can only be executed once it is called. The another important thing is that it can return the data. That means in the function some data can be returned from the function to the variables. That means the data can be written by the function. The very first thing in defining the function is this keyword, that is def. Def defines the function. That means initially we need to define the function followed by a body, that is the block of code, and again on where we want to call that function. So, basically the function has three bodies. We are going to see each body in the next slide, but before that now let us look at an example of the function. You can see here the starting is with the def, that means we are defining the function. After that you need to put the name of the function. It is the name given by the user. Here the name of the function is my function, followed by this parenthesis. The parenthesis generally denotes the extra information, or you can say the extra parameters which we are going to pass through the functions. It is inside this parenthesis. Now, one must note down this point that here we have this colon. That means while defining the statement of a function, you need to terminate with the colon. The next one is the block of the code related to the function. It is referred as the block of code. So, here you can see that we are defining a function, and then in that function this whole thing is covered under the block of code. Here we have the two print statement. The very first one is that I am your first function. It is just going to display this thing that I am your first function, followed by the next statement, that is good morning. Now we have defined the function, and also we have covered the block of the code, that where we are going to insert this block of code. Now we are going to call the function. Now how we are going to call the function? Look at this statement. This is the calling statement. Now in this calling statement you can see that my function, which is the name defined in the definition of the function, it is as it is used in the calling statement. That means the name of the function, it is as it is from the definition of the function, followed by the parenthesis. Why we are going to pass this parenthesis? Because to get the extra information. If there is no information, that means right now we are not have this extra parameter, or you can say it is right now optional. So, right now our focus is that the name in the definition of the function and the calling statement must be the same, otherwise they cannot link one another. Now we are calling the function, now followed by, you can see var underscore 1. Here we are defining this as a variable, and in variable we are storing some information related to my function. Now since there is no statement in the function which can return some values, so right now the answer for this statement is like none keyword. The keywords are the reserved parameters which shows some specific information from the coder itself. They cannot be edited. So, ultimately this variable 1 will hold no information, or we can say it just reflects the none keyword which directly implies that it does not hold any other information in its. Now, look at the execution of the code. Now, here we have defined it along with the body of the code, and now we are executing the code. Remember, while executing the code, the definition is not executed unless it is called. That means the very first statement in the programming is this one, this is not. So, from this statement the program will execute. The function has my function name, that means now it is going for the definition of my function. That means from my calling statement now it goes towards the definition of the function. That means in function statements right now what is happening is, first the calling of the statement is taking place, after that the definition of the statement is executed, because the definition holds the block of the code that must be executed, and it is only executed when it is called. So, the very first statement that is calling that function is this one. So, it is directly transferring the control to this definition of my function, from where we are going to execute this block of code. So, here in this output you can see this whole thing is related to the output, and here you can see that yes, we got the two statement, that is I am your first function and good morning. And here you can see again we are referring to this var1 now is equal to my function. Now, here you need to note that right now this my function is creating the alias of this variable, that is variable 1. So, in this variable 1 it is referring as a alias. Right now the variable name is variable 1, or you can say it is my function. It is just like when the Abhishek has a nickname of Abhi. So, Abhi and Abhishek both are same. So, right now on that basis you can see the variable 1 is the alias, but right now it does not have any values inside its own statements. That means no return values, but still it is calling the function itself. That means right now it is creating like a alias to the function. So, here the var1 is also executing your calling statement of my function, and it is giving you back the definition of the function where the block of code is executed again. Now, the next thing is the three components of the function. The very first component is this definition, which is start with the def keyword. The second one is the body of the function, which is this whole block of code, and the third one is the calling of the function. Now, in this calling of the function, here you can see that you can call n number of times. That means the number of times can be 1, 2, 3, it depends upon your code. You can use at one place, you can use at multiple places, but you need to call that many times, that much required by your site. That means if you are going to execute the function 2 times, you need to call the function 2 times. So, this is how the function is identified into the three components: definition, body and calling of a function. Now, again you can see the execution of the code is very simple. The very first calling will call this statement and executing one by one, that is I am the body, I am the new to the Python, first time heard of function. Now, again next time we are calling, now again it is going towards the execution of the same function block. That means whenever you require a function, you just need to call it, but if you are calling the function n number of times, that means now it is going to execute n number of times. Now, the very important thing is the parenthesis. In the previous discussion we have seen the def is the keyword to define, followed by the name of the function, followed by the parenthesis. Now, in the previous example we have not seen any extra information added to the function, that means extra additional information while calling a function. Let us say when you are at a job where you required some minimum amount of inputs, The same way those minimum amount of inputs are given by this parenthesis. Now, in parenthesis here you can see that we have the 3 variable f name, r number, and the last one is marks. That means right now you are defining a function which required 3 additional information. Whatever the information you are putting in the parenthesis, that is the minimum requirement to run a function. That means if it is not fulfilled by your side, it will never be executed. Now, here you can see that when you are executing a function, this parenthesis represent the extra information and the rest is information is the same, that is the block of code. Now, here you can see that we have 3 extra information, and when we are calling the function, now here you can see that we have only one extra information. Let us say we are defining a function to make an omelette. An omelette requires 3 substances, one is egg, the second one is oil, the third one is pan. So, out of the 3 options, if someone is missing, what will happen? Now, that is not the omelette. The same way here it is happening that in the definition you require 3 parameters, but in the calling statement you are just providing 1, and you know that 1 is not equal to 3. That means right now when you are going to call this function, the interpreter automatically stops here. Why? Because it will create the error. The number of the inputs required are 3 and you are just giving 1, that is Shivam only. That means the 3 variable required 3 additional information and you are still giving only 1. Due to this, it will not be executed, rather it will halt at that point. Now, we can check this output and here you can see. Now, in this function we have the 3 input, and when we are calling the function you can see that here we have the 3 information, that is why it is running. But what about if some parameters are missing? Here you can see it is the type error and it directly says the function missing one required positional argument. So, right now the next information coming from this output is that these are referred as the positional arguments. That means whatever the extra parameter or information you are going to provide, these are referred as the positional arguments. That means if the positional arguments defined in a function and in a calling are not same, it will directly go for the error statement. So, here you can see the number of the information while calling is 2, and in the definition it is required 3. So, ultimately 2 is not equal to 3, that means the informations are not matching up with the definition. So, ultimately it will halt. So, due to this the third calling statement fails with the error, but in the first 2 statement here you can see that yes, we are passing the information 3 datas, and the very first data is considered as string data type, the second data type and the third are integer. That means the string and the integers data type are transferred to the function definition, and here in the first statement you can see the f name information is printed with the cricket. The 2 strings add up together. We have come up this thing in the previous lecture already. So, here the Shivam plus cricket becomes Shivam cricket. So, here the output here you can see the Shivam cricket. The same way the next statement is my roll number followed by the roll number variable, where you are going to see that the roll number is given in int information. The same way the third one, that is marks. Now, here you have understand the very important point is that the positional arguments must be same in the definition as well as in calling statement. Otherwise, it cannot provide you the correct match between the definition and calling statement. If it is not going to match, ultimately it will go for the error that some parameters are missing. The next one is Here you can see the another example for the positional argument. Now, here we are taking the two positional arguments and the block of code is little bit lengthy, and here you can see some arithmetic operations and with the help of function. So, we are taking two parameters from the user at the calling, and here you can see the calling. Now, look at the definition of the calling. The function name followed by the two information. Now, the two informations are not directly provided, rather they are provided in terms of variables. That means, you can say the indirect information can be provided to the calling statement. So, here you can see the we are putting the a variable and b variable. So, ultimately the information of 10 and 2 will pass on to the calling statement and it will go towards the definition. From definition it will match this parameter and then executing one by one statement. So, the very first statement is the addition of 10 comma 2, that is you will get the answer 12. Now, similarly 10 minus 2, that is 10, 10 multiply 2, that is 20, and so on. So, ultimately what is happening here, that the every parameters are very important in the functions, and the beginning of the function starts with the positional arguments of definition and calling must be same, otherwise the function will not run. Here you can see even in the output that what we have discussed is the same thing. So, here you can see in the execution of the code that yes, we can pass on the information and in function we can do anything. So, here we are doing some arithmetic operations and we have successfully completed the arithmetic operation with the help of functions. Now, the next important thing is the difference between the arguments and parameter. Generally, there is no difference between the parameters and argument on the general basis, but some people really want to show the difference between the argument and parameters. So, we are going for the difference between the arguments and the parameters. Here you can see that these parameters are basically for the definition of the function. That means, when you are putting some extra information, those are referred as parameters, but the same informations are called by calling function, they are referred as arguments. That means, if the parameters which are going to pass in the definition of a function, they are referred as parameters, but if the same information is passed in the calling statement, that is referred as arguments. So, ultimately here you can see when you are using the def keyword, in that the information in the parenthesis is referred as parameters. So, the positional arguments can be referred as parameters only if they are in definition of a function, but if they are not in the definition, rather they are in calling of a function, then they are referred as arguments. So, here you can see that in the calling of a function they are referred as argument. The same positional arguments are referred as arguments. Now, look at the example, and here we are going to see the parameters and arguments. Since this is the definition of the function, our function name is ref, that is ref, and in that we have the extra information. In this extra information we have the two extra information, and this is referred as parameter, or you can write parameters. The same way, when we are calling the function, this statement is the calling of a function, because this is the name of the function ref, and in that it is passing some information. Now, this information is referred as arguments. So, ultimately the positional arguments can be referred as parameters or arguments. The parameters are referred only when they are called in the definition of a function, but when they are not called in a definition, rather at the calling of the statement, then they are referred as arguments. Otherwise, there is no difference between the parameters or argument. You can just also call the positional arguments, that is also totally correct. So, here you can see that the information is Monu Kumar with 45 and the Keshav 35. Now, here you can see the parameters, or you can say the arguments are changing. In the one calling statement we have the 2, in the third one we have 3. So, here again you can see when we are calling the function with the right numbers, it is executed, but when we are calling it with the wrong parameters, it is not going to be executed, because it requires 2 positional arguments. So, ultimately this thumb rule always remains valid, that is the positional arguments in the definition must be equal to the positional arguments in calling statement, or you can say the parameters must be equal to arguments as per the difference between the parameters and arguments. But now the next question is it really always in all time that the parameter must always equal to arguments? There are cases where this number can change. That means, yes, we can run the program if the parameters and arguments are not same, but those are under some conditions. So, the next arguments, because in the previous argument we have seen that the position of the arguments are very important. That means, the first will catch the first fish. It is just like that. That means, whenever we are calling the definition of a function along with the calling statement, the number of arguments and the parameters must be same. The second thing is the very first parameter will catch the first argument. The same way the second will the second, third will third. That is referred as the positional argument. That means, on the basis of position, if your position is second, you will fetch the thing at second position. But let us say if you really do not want to go for the position, you want to become independent of the position, then it is better to remember that we can also move to the arbitrary constants or arbitrary arguments. The biggest thing in the arbitrary argument is this asterisk mark. Whenever we are putting this asterisk mark in front of the variable that is passed inside the definition of a function, that means, when we are making a parameter of a function and that parameter is starting with a star mark, that is asterisk mark. Now, that is referred as arbitrary argument. Arbitrary means anything, any number that is not fixed, that is volatile, or you can say that is it is not constant, it is not rigid. That means, if the number of informations are 2, the arguments will fetch 2 information. If the number of informations are coming 5, it will fetch all 5 information. It does not always apply the rule of parameters must be equal to the arguments. So, this is one case in which the parameters are not equal to the arguments, that is the arbitrary arguments. But in that you need to remember that this star mark must be placed on the parameter. Along with that, you need to understand. Now, here is the next surprise. This surprise is tuple. In the previous lectures, we have already come across this data type. In the tuple, it represents the fixed order. That means, you cannot change the order of the data once it is passed to a function. So, here the order is very important. Care for the order. That means, whatever the order is coming from the calling of the statement to the definition of a function, that time that order is maintained, because the data type is tuple. Tuple is totally a fixed data type, or you can say rigid data type. It cannot change any information from one order to another. For example, your account number. The account number cannot be changed. Even your Aadhaar card cannot be changed. So, 12 digits remains always the same order is maintained while calling to the definition of the function because of this asterisk mark. Now, look at the program of this arbitrary argument. Now, in the definition of the function, here you can see that we are calling the very first parameter name. It is a very simple parameter, but look at the second parameter, it starts with the star, that means it is the arbitrary parameter. Since it is an arbitrary parameter, that means it can accommodate any numbers of input from the calling statement. And now look at the calling statement. Now here look at the information 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that means 2 is not equal to 5, but the star mark will hold all extra information directly from the calling of the statement. That means the Monu Kumar will directly go towards the name, but rest information will be blocked under the tuple data type and will be fetched by the second parameter, because the second parameter is the arbitrary argument. So, arbitrary argument is holding all the information, all extra information in one. This arbitrary arguments are also referred as the packing arguments. That means, they are directly packing the whole information together in the form of one variable. Now, here you can see the output, and here you can see that all data types are fetched to one single parameter, that is sem mk, and when we are going for the loop operation, the sem mk is an iterable object. Now, the iterable object represents the collection of the object, and this collection is giving you the output one by one. Now, look at the output. I think so the output is like a degree to a student. Here the very first thing is the name, that is the name is Monu Kumar, followed by you can see the marks scored in the first semester is this, second, third, fourth. Now, here in the second and the first, you can see that the informations are changed. That means, one student results displays fourth semester, but the second displays only 3. So, here you can see the next advantage, that it is not necessary that you need to call the statement with a fixed number of arguments. You can change the number of arguments, as you can see in this example. So, here you can see that the student is in the fourth semester, and here you can see the student is in the fifth semester. So, the every student is applicable for this function. Now, the next topic is the keyword argument, because the arbitrary arguments required the order, but sometimes we do not want to follow the order. In that, what we are going to do is that we are going to use the keyword arguments. The keyword is generally used to mark the position, or you can say mark the variable, and in which the data is to be put while calling a function. The parameters, or here you can see the parameters and arguments are same as it is in a function definition, but the only difference is it is the keyword argument. Generally, the keyword argument represents the direct information or a direct link between the variables. That means, from one information, that information will be given to only the specific person. Let us say we want a phone number must be registered on a person X name. That X name will represent that phone number. That means, that phone number is a unique ID and given to a unique person. There is a link. The same link is mentioned by the keyword parameters or keyword arguments. So, here you can see that the very thing is that it is a key value pair. That means, for the key there is a value, for the value there is a key. It is right or not? No, because for this statement, that means for the key, because the key is a specific one, and for this specific key we have value. But in the vice versa order, that is not true. That means for the value there is a key. No, for the key there is a value. That means for the parameters there are the values which must be given from the calling, but there the order can be changed because that is already linked. That is, the key value is already linked to a value. So, in order to access a value you required the key, because with the help of the key only you can fetch the value. Just like in any bank account, without the bank account you cannot access the information related to that account. The same way it is happening with this one, without the key you cannot access any value. Now, look at the example of this one. Now, here you can see that we have 4 parameters: name, age, marks 10, marks 12. So, here you can see the very first data is the name, the second one is age, the third and fourth are marks of 10th and 12th. Now, look at the order while calling. Now, here before calling the statement we have already marked that data of Monu Kumar must be transferred to the name data type. That means, this name will automatically fetch Monu Kumar. The order is not very important. Why? Because at the calling we have already linked the data with the key, and due to this the order is not important, or you can say you are independent of the order, and due to this the information is provided at the right place without any concern of order. That means independent of order. Similarly, in the next example here you can see that now the data is transferred in the form of indirect data type, or you can say variables. The variables are the containers which contains the information. So, that is making the indirect connection between the data. So, indirect data is transferred to the function itself. You can see in the output that every data is marked at the right place. That means, this is the very important feature of the keyword argument, where the values are totally linked to their respective keys, because the keys are unique features, not the values are the unique features. So, due to this, here you can see that the data is totally displayed. So, there is less chances of errors while making the connection between the datas. So, this is the role of the keyboard arguments. With this, I will finish my lecture. Thank you to all.